Hello, Marshall Hill families. Patrick O'Donnell here, principal, and I want to thank you for joining me today as I talk with you a little bit about chronic absenteeism. Not the most inspirational or uplifting of topics, but one that nonetheless needs to be discussed. So, what is chronic absenteeism? Chronic absenteeism, it's when a student misses 10% or more of the school year. So here in West Milford, that amounts to basically a student missing 18 days or more of a single school year. Now, in New Jersey, schools with 10% or more of their students missing 10% or more of the school year, they're required to submit action plans, which detail steps that they're taking to improve chronic absenteeism. So, for our purposes, we have roughly 280 students here at Marshall Hill. That would be the equivalent of about 28 students missing 18 days or more of the school year. Well, we were one of those schools that now has to submit a chronic absenteeism action plan. But we're not alone. This is a state and a national concern. So, just to give you some context here with these numbers. So, you're going to notice there's going to be data from the 2018 to 2019 school year. I included that because that was the last year before the pandemic hit. The 2019-2020 school year, that was my first year as principal here at Marshall Hill. That's the year that obviously everything shut down in March of 2020. And then there was the impact of virtual learning in the 19 to 20 and then the 20 to 21 school year. We were on this sort of hybrid, like in person, but also learning virtually for a while that year. So that's why there's no data for those years. Part of the reasoning for that, really the only reasoning for that, is that the validity of that data, could be questioned because you're taking attendance through the computer screen, and what is attending virtually actually look like, right? So it's the data necessarily may not be that valid. So we're really focusing on that 18 to 19 school year as sort of our baseline, and then looking at the subsequent years, starting with 21 to 22, 22 to 23, and obviously last year 23, 24. Now you will notice there's no 2023, 2024 national data available. It's simply because I couldn't really locate it with full confidence that was correct. And I think part of that might be that I'm just guessing here that maybe states are reporting their 23, 24 data at different paces to the U.S. Department of Ed. I'm not sure. But regardless, that's the reason for that. But when you look at the national numbers, it was at 15% in the 2018-2019 school year. And by the time 21-22 rolled around, it had doubled, more than double, obviously, to 31%. Come down slightly to 28% in the 22-23 school year. We'll see whatever the 23-24 school year data looks like federally, but those are the numbers there. That was, again, gathered from the U.S. Department of Education. Now, looking at the state numbers, they're not as high as the national numbers, but they're still high. It was 10.6% in the 2018-2019 school year. And then it had risen to the 18%, then 17, then 16. So pretty much staying flat with a slight decrease those subsequent years. Now, that data was taken from an April 4th, 2024 Bergen Record article. Now, I read an article on NJ.com earlier this month, and it had said that 72% of all schools who submitted attendance data last year were required to submit a chronic absenteeism action plan. And unfortunately, Marshall Hill is one of those 72% of schools who submitted attendance data. So at Marshall Hill, just kind of looking at our general overall numbers, last year, the chronic absenteeism rate was 10.9%. Start off with the good news. The good news is that number was pretty much cut in half from the previous year. We were up to 21% in the 22-23 school year. That number came down to 10.9% last year. But obviously, it's just over that 10% threshold for schools then having to develop a chronic absenteeism action plan. But in 2018, 2019, that number was only at 5%. Now, when you look at, let's like drill down a little further. So I wanted to look at our students with disabilities and just see what their absenteeism rate was. So I used our student information system to kind of filter that out and see. So when we talk about students with disabilities, for this purpose, I'm talking about students who have either a speech only IEP, or they have sort of like a full like instructional IEP. So an IEP, for example, when I say IEP, that's an individualized education plan that a student may receive, which changes their instructional program. So they may be, for example, put into a resource room for they're pulled out of the general education room and they go into a resource room for math and or language arts, and so and they have like a modifications and basically a program that's tailored to meet their needs. It's individualized to those students. There are the students who, in order to benefit from that individualization and those modifications, they are the students that need to be in school the most to really benefit from that, obviously. And in the 2018-2019 school year, that number, our chronic absenteeism rate, was only at 4%. Then after the pandemic hit, those numbers skyrocketed, 18.2%, with a high of 24.5% in the 22-23 school year, which meant that in the 22-23 school year, one out of every four students with a learning disability ended up being absent from school chronically. So had 18 days or more absent. So those students who needed to be in school the most, a quarter of them were not. That number did come down to 18.6% last year, but obviously the number is still way too high for my taste. So, just some things to consider and keep in mind when you're looking at this data, that demographics have shifted dramatically. The district's elementary school restructuring changed a lot as far as our student population goes. So, we lost a fairly large segment of students who were, Marshall Hill students for years. They went to Upper Greenwood Lake School. We took a lot of the students from Westbrook when the Westbrook School was repurposed. We took a lot of those students here, so we have a lot of the Westbrook population. We also took in students from Maple Road as well. So demographics have completely shifted. The Climb program, that was a program that was here at Marshall Hill for years. That our Climb Autism program has moved to Paradise Knoll School. So that's another demographic shift. And then families, just sort of your every year families move in and out. Sometimes if they're families that are in a more transient situation, they'll move in, and in the same year they'll move out of the district. But every year, you'll have families that are just moving in, and you'll have different families that sell their home and then they move out. But all of that typical stuff combined with the big restructuring a couple years ago has definitely changed our demographics. We're not looking at When you look at that data, we're not looking at like the same group of students over 5 years. We're talking about different kids for sure, different families. Another consideration is obviously the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Uh, the impact of remote learning, but also shifting viewpoints on perhaps uh, has the viewpoint of in-person attendance shifted for some families. So that's something that needs to be considered. Also, when I presented this at the PTA meeting the other evening, somebody brought up, and I thought it was a great point, the expansion of remote work for parents. A lot of parents working remotely still these days, even though I think that number has come down a little bit. But a lot of parents still working remotely, and that wasn't really the case before in the 2018-2019 school year. So has that ended up changing things a little bit where excuse me, where parents may not be in as much of a rush to get themselves out the door in the morning because they have to drive to work. Instead, they work remotely. Could that be changing the morning routine a little bit? It's just things to keep in mind and consider. Now, what are the ramifications of chronic absenteeism? Well, they are there. So, you know, you automatically look at poor academic performance, right? Chronic absenteeism, multiple studies show, leads to lower grades on report cards. It leads to lower standardized testing scores. In fact, I put a 2011 California study there that showed that they looked at in the district seven at all of their students who were chronically absent in grades K and one. So the students that missed 10% or more of the school year, they were looking specifically at grades K and one. Only 17% of those students who were chronically absent were actually proficient readers by the end of third grade. Only 17%, which meant 83% of them ended up not being proficient readers. Compare that with 64% of their non chronically absent peers being proficient readers by the end of third grade. So 17, 64, the difference is very clear. Grades K and one, especially when there's chronic absenteeism cases at the kindergarten or first grade level, especially, um, it concerns me a lot because they are such important foundational grades for developing reading skills, right? And we need to make sure that we try to get students as proficient as possible in reading by the time third grade hits. So when kids are absent chronically in grades K and one, it's always a little bit more of a dagger, and it's something that I think I want to make sure that gets communicated. And by highlighting studies like this, which show the importance of being in school frequently, especially at the early grades, it is critical really to their long-term development as readers and as students. So you even look at social disengagement as a ramification, right? When you're in school fewer days, you have the opportunity to make friends at a lower rate. If you're missing a lot of days, you may not be making as many friendships. Also, diminished social skills. So many of our kids here, they are actively learning social skills. They don't know they're learning social skills in the moment, right? But they are. They're learning social skills out there on the playground, conflict resolution, sharing, right? So like they're learning social skills throughout the day, but if they're not present consistently to do that, and they're not making as many friends, that's something that I absolutely consider to be a ramification of chronic absenteeism. Graduation rates are significantly lower. When it's just like fast forwarding ahead to high school and fast forwarding ahead even past that, what is that doing to employment prospects and performance in the future? If kids are developing the pattern that they're not showing up to complete their work, then is that sort of going to become a learned behavior, and is that going to continue on when they're actually going to be employees of their own and making money and providing for their families, right? So that's something to consider. Is chronic absenteeism impacting academics? Then is that going to carry with them throughout, their K to 12 experience and even into college? Is that going to impact their ability to land employment, right? So when we look at chronic absenteeism, there's the ramifications, not, oh, you get an attendance letter from Mr. O'Donnell. No, the ramifications are much more serious than that. Now, you guys were amazing when I shared out the Google form. It was an anonymous survey, and I shared it out on January 6th. It was the day that we had the evening conferences. And I think I just had good timing. It wasn't even intentional, but I think I just had good timing because I shared it out. It was like shortly before that. And I actually think I saw parents, completing the survey here too, which was great while they were waiting for their conference to start. But we got 110 responses. I think it also helped that it was a one question survey, which maybe I need to do that more in the future, right? If you want people to complete a survey, make it one question, real quick and easy. But I am so thankful because I feel like normally when you get a survey, if it's only like 10 respondents, then you're not really all that confident that you're getting a true indication of how people feel. But when you get 110 responses, that's a pretty good indication of how people feel. So when the question was, I think it was simply, from a parent's perspective, what are the reasons why a student will be chronically absent? It wasn't talking about necessarily your student. It was talking about, just generally, why do you think a student would be absent chronically? What are the main reasons? And they could select multiple options. The option that received the most votes by far was student illness. I mean, we're talking a little over 90 people had responded that student illness would absolutely be a reason for chronic absenteeism. Family vacations was second. Family vacations was almost 60. And I can attest to that. I just, when I get a chance to look at the attendance data and the reasons why students are out, I often do see family vacations and not passing judgment. I understand the importance of, especially if it's that like once in a lifetime vacation to get that incredible life experience, right? Of maybe going to another country or going to a national park. I can understand that, but I think we do need to be honest about the impact that those extended vacations certainly can have, right? If you take a if you take an 8-day family vacation, so the child's missing 8 school days, at that point there's only 10 days left before you reach that mark where you're considered chronically absent, right? And then you factor in, especially a year like this where everything's going around, right? Stomach bug or flu or COVID and you name it. Um, that doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room left. So those days can kind of be taken up pretty quick. So it's I say that because if there is a vacation during the school year, it's a lot easier to hit that chronically absent mark than you may think. So that it was student illness, family vacation, student mental health concerns, and lack of priority academics at home. Those were also heavier responses. It looks like just under 40 for each one of those. So just wanted to share those results, and I thank everybody for that. And this survey result, it does sort of inform me on what the parent perspective is regarding it. So it's important. So what are we doing at the school level to combat chronic absenteeism? So I'm going to highlight some of those things that we're doing, but I do want to preface it by saying that I think for us to be successful in getting those numbers down to where we want to see them, we really are going to need it's not just a school level thing that is going to accomplish it, right? We're going to need obviously the support of the entire parent community as well, and I have no doubt I'm going to receive it because you guys have always been supportive and you've been amazing. But I want to make sure I preface it with that. But at the school level, as far as what we can control at the school level, we're certainly going to be upholding our commitment as a national school of character. uh, we're going to be paying attention to school climate. I'm happy to say, extremely happy to say, that our student climate survey results, which I'll be sharing at some point shortly, but our student climate survey results and our parent climate survey results both indicated a healthy and safe school environment, which I know I sense it in the staff and the students, and I sense it every day because we're here in the building. But it's always, when you see it formally in a survey, it always makes you feel good too. It just kind of reinforces what you're doing. And I'm very impressed by those results, which I'm going to share some examples on the slide, as you can see. But what you'll notice is that we really do have this inverse relationship between climate survey results and our chronic absenteeism data at Marshall Hill. And what I mean by that is, let's take a look at the student survey. So when we gave, I can't say we, I wasn't here, but in the 2018-2019 school year, when the school gave the survey at that time, asking students, is bullying infrequent and do students feel safe? 85% of students were neutral or agreed or strongly agreed that bullying is infrequent and that students feel safe. So that was in the 2018-2019 school year. Good number. That number, we've been able to improve on that since that survey was given, to where now 94% of students that were surveyed are neutral or strongly agree that bullying does not happen often, that kids here generally feel safe. So a great number. I'd love to see the number at 100%, but 94% is an impressive number, and I am happy with that. However, that also then brings up the point, well, then why then the rise of chronic absenteeism, which is what we're trying to address. Just to further that point, look at the improvement from 2018-2019 school year as far as parents feeling that way. When that survey was given in 18-19, that number was at 75%. Well, this past year, just this most recent back to school night, when I gave it that night, 96% of parents were either neutral or agreed or strongly agreed that bullying is infrequent and that students feel safe. That was a 21% jump. So as we've seen these huge rises in how stakeholders feel about our climate, at the same time, we've noticed, um, a rise in our absenteeism, which typically you would be under the impression that with a poor climate you may see more absenteeism, but that's not the case. There's a healthy climate, but we're still seeing those rates of absenteeism. So we are going to give periodic surveys to students just to check in on social emotional well-being. That kind of comes from parents. It was I think the third highest response, received the third highest response rate of mental health concerns. And it is somewhat often that we'll hear from a parent, well, like they just needed a day, they needed like a mental health day. So that's something where we want to make sure that we are addressing, because we are of the belief that they, when they're here within the walls of Marshall Hill, they're safe, they're loved, they're cared for, they have access to resources. Uh, you know, we want to make sure that they're in school as much as possible. So if there is a mental health concern, we want to be able to help address it here as well. We're going to continue to monitor student data and compare it with absenteeism data. So looking at their performance in the classroom, looking at iReady, et cetera. And we're also going to be recognizing and celebrating student academic growth and performance at assemblies every trimester. We just had an assembly where we recognized our characters of the month for Character Ed, but we also then highlighted the highest achievers for iReady at each grade level, but also the students who demonstrated the most growth. So the students who maybe didn't start off that high, but have really shown that they've been working hard and doing their best. We have a social worker here who's available. Mrs. DeBerry is her name. I have her email address there. She's available for any student needs. If you have a student that is struggling with, school avoidance, please reach out to her and let her know. And if it's something that's, if it's an issue that's causing them, anguish outside of school, still reach out, make her aware, and we can always help to direct you to other resources, from outside sources as well to help out. Parent outreach, we're going to continue that. This is an example of parent outreach. The state does not require me to share out a presentation with parents about this. However, I felt it was important to be able to do so. So one, I'm being completely transparent as far as, hey, this is what we're dealing with. But two, so I can really kind of relay, and you're hearing it from me directly, the importance of making sure that to the best of your ability that there's regular on-time attendance for kids. Our INRS attendance team is going to continue to review cases of chronic absenteeism. We're going to continue our our attendance letters. Those letters are auto-generated from a real-time student information system at 5, 10, 15, and more intervals. So, please don't ever view those letters as like something personal from me and a judgment on parenting. That's not the case at all. They're simply referred to as like nudge letters. And those letters are recommended by the New Jersey Department of Education to combat chronic absenteeism. So it helps serve the purpose of informing parents, hey, this is how many absences your child's at, and this is the impact of attendance. So that's why our district, has those letters. Attendance meetings will happen with parents as needed, especially when those absence totals start getting higher. And the purpose of those attendance meetings, again, it's not like a punitive thing. It's simply to see, like, what can we do to help you? Maybe there's something we can do at the school level to help you ensure that, your kids are not chronically absent. And truancy court is needed. It's never something a principal wants to do, but it is a tool technically for when the absences become truly excessive. Just reminders for when to keep your child home. If they've had a fever, vomit, or diarrhea in the past 24 hours, please keep them home. We do ask that you keep them home at that point. The fever too, that's a fever, they need to come back with a temperature that is not being influenced by fever reducing medication as well. But as soon as those things resolve themselves and it's been 24 hours, please send them back into school. A new bad cough, if the student has a really bad cough, please, keep them home. We're not talking about a new cough like, Mom, I got to stay home. No, we're talking about, a really bad cough. And if you ever want to kind of run it by Nurse Riley, please reach out to our nurse, Joanna Riley, and she can kind of help guide you with that as well. A new rash that itches and is spreading, and of course, pink eye, please keep them home. So thank you so much for joining me for this presentation. I very much appreciate it. If you've made it to the end of this presentation and you're still listening to me, kudos to you. But it is an important topic, and I do want to share why. Please know we are here to help. We're partners. I like to think that ever since I started here, that I've tried to make that crystal clear that this is a partnership between home and school. You all have been so gracious and supportive of everything that I've wanted to do and that the schools wanted to do. And we want to make sure we're being supportive of you and helping you. And we're in this together. We are going to work together to make sure that we get our chronic absenteeism rate down. So let's commit ourselves as a school community to endeavor to get our chronic absenteeism rate down for the benefit of our children. So thank you very much for joining, and have a great night.